Media fact checker. Massive theft of Nestlé KitKat shipment in Europe ahead of Easter. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A truck carrying 413,793 units of Nestlé's new KitKat Formula 1 chocolate range was stolen in transit in Europe on the 26th of March, 2024. The stolen shipment weighed approximately 12 tons and was en route from a factory in central Italy to Poland. Nestlé confirmed the theft to AFP and is investigating with local authorities and supply chain partners. The stolen KitKats are part of a new chocolate range designed to resemble Formula 1 race cars. Nestlé warned that stolen bars could enter unofficial markets and can be traced via batch codes on individual bars. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian mentions The Athletic as a source for the F1 chocolate bar detail, but Newscomiu does not reference any secondary source for this information. No contradictions in core factual claims, both sources agree on all verifiable details. This story was covered by The Guardian and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Teenage assault on paramedic after stolen car crash in Melbourne. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A stolen Mazda 3 was involved in a crash with a Volkswagen Jetta at Nicholson St and Victoria Parade, Carlton, just before 6 a.m. on Saturday. 4 teenage males were travelling in the stolen Mazda 3 when it collided with the Volkswagen. 2 boys fled the scene immediately after the crash. A 19-year-old man and a 15-year-old boy were injured in the crash and taken to hospital by ambulance. A 66-year-old man and a 76-year-old woman from Terang were in the Volkswagen and taken to hospital as a precaution. But not all outlets told the same story. Newscomiu says the 19-year-old man assaulted the paramedic, but ABC says the 15-year-old boy did. Newscomiu does not specify the severity of injuries for the 19-year-old, while ABC states the 19-year-old was seriously injured. Newscomiu does not mention the 15-year-old receiving minor injuries as ABC does. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Jannik Sinner wins Miami Open title, completing Sunshine Double. Jiri Lehecka reaches first Masters 1000 final. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Jannik Sinner won the Miami Open title with a 6-4, 6-4 victory over Jiri Lehecka on 2024-03XX, exact date unspecified. Sinner completed the Sunshine Double by winning both Indian Wells and Miami Open titles in the same year, becoming the 8th male player to achieve this feat. Sinner has won 34 consecutive sets at Masters 1000 level, dating back to his triumph in Paris in November 2023. Sinner defeated Alexander Zverev in the Miami Open semifinals with a 6-3, 7-6, 4 score on 2024-03XX, exact date unspecified. Jiri Lehecka reached his first Masters 1000 final in Miami after defeating Arthur Fils 6-2, 6-2 in the semifinals. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states Sinner has 34 consecutive Masters level sets since Paris 2023, while Article 3 implies this includes wins from Madrid 2024, April, onward, which contradicts the timeline. Article 1 mentions Sinner's 2023 French Open match against Lehecka as a 6-0, 5-0, 6-1, 6-2 rout, but Article 2 does not reference this specific score or match. Article 2 describes Zverev's semi-final loss to Sinner as a suffocating experience with a focus on Zverev's overhead error, while Article 1 does not emphasize this moment as defining. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Northern Territory records 3 deaths in custody within a week, including 2 recent incidents and a fatal stabbing. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A 26-year-old man died at Darwin Correctional Centre on Sunday morning, 7:50 a.m., after being found unresponsive in his cell, Medical assistance was provided, but he was declared deceased at the scene. The death at Darwin Correctional Centre is not believed to be suspicious according to NT Police and NT Correctional Services. A 25-year-old Indigenous man died in police custody in Darwin's northern suburbs on Tuesday after being arrested for an assault at Taiwi Gardens Retirement Village and experiencing breathing difficulties in the back of a police vehicle. The 25-year-old man was found unresponsive in the police vehicle. Officers began CPR, and an ambulance arrived, but he died later that evening at Royal Darwin Hospital, 10:10 p.m. Both deaths in custody, 26-year-old at Correctional Centre and 25-year-old in police vehicle, are being investigated by the NT coroner and will undergo a coronial inquest. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1, ABC, states the 25-year-old man was arrested at Taiwi Gardens Retirement Village, but Article 3, Guardian, states he was arrested following reports of an assault at Casuarina. Article 1, ABC, says the 25-year-old man was found unresponsive in the back of a caged police vehicle, while Article 3, Guardian, does not specify the type of vehicle. Article 2, Newskamau, states the 19-year-old stabbing victim was found in a car with serious stab wounds, while Article 4, ABC, describes the wound as a serious stab wound to his upper body without specifying the severity level. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. F1 safety crisis after Oliver Bearman's high-speed crash at Japanese Grand Prix. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Oliver Bearman crashed at the Japanese Grand Prix, Suzuka Circuit, after evading Franco Colapinto's Alpine due to a closing speed of 50 km per hour, 31 miles per hour. Bearman's Haas was traveling at 190 miles per hour, 307 km per hour when he hit the barriers at a 50G impact, escaping with only bruising. The crash occurred because Bearman was using boost mode, electrical power, while Colapinto was recovering energy, creating a significant speed differential. Haas team principal Ayao Komatsu called the incident a lucky escape and stated, "Yes. It could have been a lot worse." Carlos Sainz warned before the season that such closing speeds and accidents were likely under the new regulations, urging the FIA to act. But not all outlets told the same story. Guardian Article 1 states Bearman was travelling at 190 miles per hour when he crashed, while Guardian Article 2 clarifies the speed as 307 km per hour, 191 miles per hour. No source mentions Bearman limping from the crash, though ABC's headline suggests this detail. Guardian Article 1 does not mention the car being in pieces after impact, while Guardian Article 2 emphasizes this detail. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Fungal outbreak at Sydney Hospital linked to construction-related mould exposure. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Royal Prince Alfred Hospital's transplant unit, Ward 9E, experienced a fungal outbreak in late 2025 linked to aspergillosis mould, killing 2 patients and seriously infecting 4 others. A balcony near construction work was identified as the probable source of the mould exposure, accessible by all 6 infected patients. 6 transplant patients were diagnosed with aspergillosis between November and December 2025, with 2 deaths directly attributed to the infection. Construction on the hospital's $900 million redevelopment was occurring adjacent to the balcony during the outbreak. NSW Health released a final report on Friday, May 2026, confirming the balcony and construction activities as the greatest exposure risk. But not all outlets told the same story. Newskamau states the 4th patient remains in intensive care 4 months on, May 2026, while ABC states the 3rd patient died 3 months after being diagnosed, implying a different timeline for recovery death. Newskamau does not specify the cause of death for the 3rd patient, whereas ABC clarifies it was multi-organ failure due to sepsis associated with a skin condition. ABC mentions the SAER review was conducted by senior transplant specialists and handed to Chief Health Officer Kerry Chant, while Newskamau does not reference this process. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Melbourne couple charged with slavery and abuse of Indonesian woman. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Chi Kit Chong and Angie Ye Ling Lau, Malaysian nationals, are facing slavery charges in Victoria's County Court for allegedly keeping an Indonesian woman as a slave in their Point Cook home from January 2022 to October 2022. The alleged victim, a 61-year-old Indonesian woman, was initially offered a month-long stay in early 2022 to assist the couple after Angie Ye Ling Lau gave birth to her second child. Chi Kit Chong allegedly accused the woman of causing a financial loss, a company credit card, and demanded she work off the debt, escalating control over her life. The woman was allegedly forced to sleep on the stairs or in the garage, deprived of food and sleep, and subjected to physical assaults for failing to meet Chong's demands. The alleged victim presented to St. Vincent's Hospital in October 2022 with injuries including a swollen ear, lacerations, leg swelling, and signs of malnutrition. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reports Chong allegedly told the victim she could leave if she paid $1 million, while Newscomau does not mention this specific demand. ABC states the defense lawyer Diana Price suggested the victim may have exaggerated or embellished claims, but Newscomau does not reference this specific defense argument. ABC mentions the victim was allegedly hit with a vacuum cleaner during a massage, but Newscomau does not include this detail. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. California sheriff's ballot seizures and voter fraud investigation spark legal battles. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Chad Bianco, Riverside County Sheriff and Republican gubernatorial candidate, seized 650,000 ballots from the November 2023 special election on Proposition 50. Bianco ordered an additional seizure of 426 boxes of ballot materials earlier this week as part of a criminal investigation into alleged voter fraud. The Riverside Election Integrity Team claimed a discrepancy of 45,896 votes between official results and handwritten counts, while state officials confirmed the actual difference was only 103 votes. Rob Bonta, California's Democratic Attorney General, filed a lawsuit against Bianco, accusing him of obtaining facial insufficient evidence for search warrants and violating his directives to halt the investigation. Shirley Weber, California's Secretary of State, condemned Bianco's actions as based on allegations that lack credible evidence and risking public confidence in elections. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states Bianco willfully violated Bonta's directives, while Article 2 does not mention willful disobedience but focuses on his halting the investigation due to legal pressure. Article 1 claims Bonta's office warned that search warrants were legally invalid, but Article 2 does not reference this specific warning. Article 1 attributes a quote to Bonta saying there is no indication of widespread voter fraud, while Article 2 does not include this exact phrasing. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. AFL umpire error in Geelong vs Adelaide match and ARC review process flaws. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The AFL admitted Geelong was incorrectly awarded a last disposal free kick in the fourth quarter of the match against Adelaide on the 11th of April, 2024 at Cardinia Park. Tom Atkins, Geelong, kicked the ball out of bounds in a contest with Zach Taylor, Adelaide, on the wing, but umpires awarded the free kick to Geelong. The AFL Review Centre, ARC, did not have time to intervene before the ball came back into play, meaning the decision could not be overturned. Geelong won the match by 8 points, 9.14, 68, to 9.6, 60, after the contentious free kick led to a goal by Jack Martin. This is the fifth time in 4 seasons the AFL has admitted a late umpiring mistake went against Adelaide in close losses. But not all outlets told the same story. The ABC reports the AFL explicitly confirmed the ARC would have overturned the decision, while The Age does not provide this direct AFL confirmation. The Age includes a quote from David King calling Atkins' behaviour stooging, which is not mentioned in the ABC article. The ABC does not mention the historical context of Geelong's 23-year unbeaten record at home against Adelaide, which The Age highlights. This story was covered by ABC News and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. US State Department directs embassies to counter foreign propaganda using Elon Musk's X platform. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The US State Department issued a cable signed by Secretary of State Marco Rubio on March 29 directing all American embassies and consulates to launch coordinated campaigns against foreign propaganda and disinformation. The cable instructs embassies to work alongside the US military's Psychological Operations Unit, MISO, formerly PSYOP, to counter disinformation. Elon Musk's platform X, formerly Twitter, and its community notes feature were explicitly endorsed in the cable as an innovative tool to combat anti-American propaganda without compromising free speech or privacy. The cable identifies Iran, Russia, and China as key adversaries conducting state-sponsored disinformation campaigns targeting US allies in Europe, Asia, and Latin America. The US is currently at war with Iran, which operates one of the world's most sophisticated state disinformation apparatuses according to the cable. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the two sources, as Article 2 is a condensed repetition of Article 1 with no conflicting details. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. UK nurse Lucy Letby's 2015-16 neonatal unit murder convictions and allegations of miscarriage of justice. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Lucy Letby was convicted in 2022 of murdering 7 babies and attempting to murder 7 more while working at the Countess of Chester Hospital's neonatal unit between 2015 and 2016. She was sentenced to 15 whole-life prison orders, and the Court of Appeal refused her permission to appeal in 2023. Letby's lawyer Mark MacDonald submitted an application to the Criminal Cases Review Commission, CCRC, in 2024, supported by reports from 27 medical experts, requesting a re-examination of her case. The CCRC is currently reviewing the application for a potential retrial. Former police detective Stuart Clifton, who led the Beverley Elite investigation, and Steve Watts, author of National Police Guidelines on Healthcare Deaths, initially believed Letby was guilty but later concluded the case was a miscarriage of justice. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states David Davis called Letby's case a miscarriage of justice and criticised Cheshire Police's investigation, while Article 2 quotes Cheshire Police dismissing Davis's claims as misinformation and baseless. Article 1 reports Davis arguing Cheshire Police failed to follow official guidelines and best practice, but Article 2 omits this specific criticism and instead frames Davis's comments as part of a broader core group spreading misinformation. Article 1 includes Davis's direct quote about the investigation being initiated by a single meeting with consultants who had themselves been involved in seriously inadequate care, while Article 2 does not reference this specific detail. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. AFL player Tristan Xerri suspended for wiping blood on opponent's face during match. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Tristan Xerri was sent directly to the AFL tribunal for serious misconduct after allegedly wiping blood from his nose onto Essendon captain Andrew McGrath's face during a match on the 13th of April, 2025, Saturday night, at Docklands Stadium. Xerri pleaded guilty to the charge of serious misconduct at the tribunal hearing on the 14th of April, 2025, Monday. Xerri was suspended for 3 AFL games, Good Friday vs Carlton, Brisbane, Richmond, following the incident. The incident occurred after Xerri kicked a goal from a free kick in the second quarter of North Melbourne's 12-point win over Essendon. North Melbourne's 2025 season record was 2-1 at the time of the incident. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian reports Xerri was sledged with homophobic language before the incident, but this detail is not mentioned in the Age or ABC articles. The Age states Xerri was in danger of a multiple-week suspension and could have been referred directly to the tribunal by Michael Christian, while The Guardian and ABC imply the tribunal was the only step after the match review officer's assessment. The Guardian notes the tribunal hearing was held a day earlier than usual, but this is not mentioned in The Age or ABC. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Climate change threatens Australia's superb fairy wren with extinction within decades. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The superb fairy wren is predicted to go extinct within 30 to 40 years due to climate change impacts, based on intermediate and very high emission scenarios. Researchers from Australian National University, ANU, and James Cook University conducted a study tracking superb fairy wrens in Canberra's Botanic Gardens for nearly 30 years. The study found population extinction risk within 30 to 40 years under intermediate and very high carbon emission scenarios, with extinction projected between 2059 and 2062. The superb fairy wren was voted Australia's favourite bird in 2013 and 2021 Guardian BirdLife Australia polls. The bird suffered low breeding success during dry springs and reduced adult survival following unusually warm winters and hot summers. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian does not mention the 70% mortality rate in Mount Ainslie foothills during winter 2025, while ABC reports it explicitly. The Guardian does not reference the pied currawong's decline as a potential indirect benefit for the superb fairy wren, which ABC highlights. The Guardian does not specify that the study modelled 4 climate scenarios, while ABC states this explicitly. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Nepal's former PM KP Sharma Oli arrested over alleged role in deadly protest crackdown. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. KP Sharma Oli, 74, and former Home Affairs Minister Ramesh Lehecka were arrested on Saturday, June 2025, over alleged involvement in the deaths of protesters during the Gen Z uprising in September 2024. The arrests occurred at their residences in Kathmandu, with Oli reportedly taken to a hospital due to kidney issues after arrest. Nepal's new Prime Minister Balendra Shah, Balan, was sworn in on Friday, June 2024, following a landslide election victory promising justice for the protest-related killings. A leaked government investigation report recommended 10 years in prison for Oli, Lehecka, and the former police chief for negligence in the crackdown, stating no effort was made to stop or control the firing. At least 19 protesters were killed when police opened fire during the Gen Z protests in September 2024, with nationwide unrest following a social media ban and corruption allegations. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian reports 19 protesters killed by police firing in September 2024, while ABC states 76 deaths during the crackdown. The Guardian says the investigation report found not established that there was an order to shoot, but ABC does not mention this distinction. The Guardian notes Oli was arrested early on Saturday morning, while ABC does not specify the exact time of arrest. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and SBS News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. St Kilda AFL player Lance Collard faces tribunal for alleged homophobic slur during VFL match. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Lance Collard, 21, is a St Kilda forward facing a disciplinary tribunal for an alleged homophobic slur during a VFL match against Frankston in Round 2. Collard was previously banned for 6 matches in 2024 for using a homophobic slur while playing for VFL side Sandringham, affiliated with Street Kilda. Collard was suspended for 3 weeks, reduced to 2 weeks after pleading guilty, for a high hit on an opponent in the same match where the slur was allegedly used. The AFL has referred a charge of alleged breach of AFL Rule 2.3a, conduct unbecoming, against Collard to a disciplinary tribunal hearing scheduled for next week. The incident occurred during a heated exchange in last week's VFL match against Frankston. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the two sources on core factual claims. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australian political reaction to US-Iran war and economic fallout. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Andrew Hastie, Liberal MP, criticised US President Donald Trump's huge miscalculation in the Iran war as of early March 2024. Iran has blockaded the Strait of Hormuz, impacting global fuel supply chains and Australian fuel exports. Andrew Hastie stated Australia is dependent on the export of fuel in and out of the Middle East due to its location. The Australian government announced it would underwrite additional fuel cargo deliveries to address supply shortages, March 2024. Andrew Hastie served as a Special Forces veteran and fought in the Middle East alongside US forces. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reports Hastie may be open to a gas export levy despite coalition opposition, while Newscomau does not mention this proposal. ABC states Employment Minister Amanda Rishworth explicitly said work-from-home measures are not being considered for fuel shortages, but Newscomau omits this detail. ABC notes Hastie described Trump's criticism of Australia's warship refusal as petulant, February 2024, while Newscomau does not reference this. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia's fuel reserves and potential rationing amid Middle East conflict disruptions. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Australia's current fuel reserves include 30 days worth of diesel, 39 days worth of petrol, and 30 days worth of jet fuel, ABC Article 1 and 2. The federal government has secured fuel imports through to May 2024, ABC Article 1 and 2. Internal government modelling from mid-March assumed fuel rationing would only be considered if the national stockpile dropped to 10 days supply, ABC Article 1 and 2. The government has not publicly indicated a clear threshold for restricting petrol consumption or rationing, ABC Article 1 and 2. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese announced a four-stage plan to address fuel shortages, with the current stage focused on keeping Australia moving, ABC Article 1. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states the government's modelling assumed voluntary measures would begin when stockpiles fell to 15 days, while Article 2 does not mention this specific threshold for voluntary measures. Article 1 claims the government's four-stage plan includes a take-targeted action stage for voluntary measures triggered by ongoing supply disruptions, but Article 2 does not reference this stage explicitly. Article 1 reports the government's modelling suggested diesel would last 6 months in a 20% import reduction scenario, while Article 2 states the same scenario would deplete the stockpile in 6 months, no contradiction in duration, but Article 2 omits the about qualifier. This story was covered by ABC News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Saudi Arabia's push for US to escalate military campaign against Iran amid regional war. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, urged Donald Trump not to cut short the US-Israeli war on Iran, calling it a historic opportunity to remake the Middle East, both articles, Guardian. A Saudi intelligence source confirmed MBS's role in urging the US to intensify attacks on Iran, both articles, Guardian. Trump publicly confirmed MBS's warrior status and alignment with US efforts, stating "Yeah, he's fighting with us," both articles, Guardian. Saudi Arabia has not yet engaged militarily in the nearly 4-week-old war, both articles, Guardian. Iran launched a drone attack on Saudi Arabia's Yanbu oil refinery on the Red Sea coast, Both articles, Guardian. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 does not mention Saudi Arabia's explicit pivot to Iran detent via China's 2023 brokered deal, while Article 2 details this as a key strategic failure. Article 1 omits the UAE ambassador's direct call for a conclusive military defeat of Iran, which Article 2 includes as a regional pressure point. Article 1 does not quote Saudi defense expert Hesham Al-Ghanim's assessment of Saudi cautious neutrality, while Article 2 includes this as a key Saudi stance. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Air Canada CEO's bilingualism controversy after fatal runway crash in New York. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. 2 Air Canada pilots, Antoine Forrest and Mackenzie Gunther, were killed in a collision between an Air Canada Express jet and a Port Authority fire truck at New York's LaGuardia Airport on March 22, Sunday night. The Air Canada CRJ 900 aircraft, Flight 8646, was operated by Jazz Aviation and flew from Montreal to LaGuardia with 76 passengers and 4 crew members on board. Air Canada CEO Michael Rousseau released an English-only condolence video with French subtitles, speaking only 2 French words, bonjour and merci, sparking controversy. Antoine Forrest, one of the deceased pilots, was a French-speaking Quebec resident. Over 40 people were injured in the crash, with 39 hospitalized. 2 fire truck occupants were expected to recover. But not all outlets told the same story. News Kamau states Prime Minister Mark Carney criticized Rousseau's conduct as showing lack of judgment and lack of compassion, while ABC attributes this quote to Mark Ranella. No such figure is referenced elsewhere. News Kamau reports the NTSB chair as Jennifer Homendy, but ABC does not mention her or the NTSB's technical details about the crash. News Kamau states the plane was operated by Jazz Aviation, a regional partner of Air Canada, and flew from Montreal as Flight 8646, while ABC does not specify the flight number or regional operator. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Donald Trump fires Pam Bondi as US Attorney General over Epstein files and political prosecutions. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Pam Bondi was fired as US Attorney General by Donald Trump on March 2024, exact date inferred from context. Todd Blanche, Deputy Attorney General, will serve as Acting Attorney General following Bondi's firing. Lee Zeldin, current EPA Administrator, is a top contender to replace Bondi as Permanent Attorney General. Bondi presided over the DOJ's handling of the Jeffrey Epstein files, which became a political liability for Trump. Bondi was scheduled to testify before the House Oversight Committee about the Epstein files before her firing. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian and ABC describe Bondi's initial Epstein file release as containing largely public material, but The Guardian notes she was expected to testify about mismanagement, while ABC calls it a cover-up or mismanagement. The Guardian states Bondi's firing was to transition her to a private sector role, while news.com.au implies her firing was abrupt and unceremonious. Fox News report of being informed late at night. The Guardian mentions Bondi's firing as part of a pattern of Trump ousting loyalists, but ABC and news.com.au emphasize Trump's frustration with her performance over Epstein and prosecutions. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, news.com.au, SBS News, Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Lachlan Kennedy defeats Gout Gout in 200m race at Maurie Plant Meet, marking back-to-back wins. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Lachlan Kennedy won the 200-meter at the Maurie Plant Meet on the 9th of March, 2025 with a time of 20.38s, beating Gout Gout who finished in 20.43s. The race took place at Lakeside Stadium, Albert Park, Melbourne, with around 9,000 to 10,000 spectators in pouring rain. Kennedy also won the 100-meter earlier in the evening with a time of 10.03s, setting a meet record. Gout Gout was the national record holder in the 200m, 20.02s in Ostrava, and reached the semifinals at the 2023 World Athletics Championships in Tokyo. Cam Myers set a new Australian 1,500-metre record with 3:30.42s, surpassing the previous all-comers mark of 3:31.25s. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian mentions Goutmania drove a sellout of around 10,000 fans last year, but rain reduced attendance this year, while SMH and ABC state the event was a sellout with 10,000 fans despite rain. The Guardian describes the rain as reducing walk-up ticket sales, but SMH and ABC do not mention this distinction. The Guardian compares Kennedy and Gout's rivalry to Stallone and Creed, a framing not present in the other sources. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Barbie Dream Fest event scandal and fan backlash over underwhelming experience. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The event was called Barbie Dream Fest and took place in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, over a weekend in 2024. Tickets ranged from $69 ABC to $72 Guardian for a one-day pass and up to $449 ABC or $452.50 Guardian for a Dream Pass. The event was organized by Mischief Management, which licensed the Barbie brand from Mattel. Attendees reported receiving a swag bag containing only a plastic hairbrush and Barbie-themed hand sanitizer. The roller disco was described as a small 20 by 40-foot concrete space with no decorations, Guardian, or a barricaded section for kids, ABC. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states the Dream Pass cost $449 $655 Australian dollars, while The Guardian states it was $452.50, £54 conversion implied. ABC mentions Serena Williams and Angel Reese as A-list speakers in attendance, while The Guardian does not specify names but implies broader claims. ABC describes the roller disco as barricaded and only big enough for kids, while The Guardian calls it a 20 by 40-foot square of concrete with no decorations. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Perth man accused of attempted terror attack at Invasion Day rally pleads mental health defence. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Liam Alexander Hall, a 32-year-old man, is accused of attempting to bomb an Invasion Day rally in Perth on January 26, 2026. Hall allegedly threw a homemade fragment bomb filled with ball bearings and nail screws into a crowd of 500+ people at Forest Place, Perth CBD. The device did not detonate and caused no injuries, but police cordoned off Murray Street Mall and evacuated the area. Hall is charged with engaging in a terrorist act, making or possessing explosives under suspicious circumstances, and intent to harm or endanger life. Hall is currently detained at the Franklin Centre at Greylands Hospital in Perth's western suburbs. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian says Hall's next court date is May 27th, but News Kamau and ABC say it is May 26th. The Guardian reports Hall did not appear via video link on Tuesday due to medical reasons, while ABC and News Kamau do not mention this. News Kamau describes the bomb as a glass container filled with liquid, screws and ball bearings, while The Guardian and ABC call it a fragment bomb with nails ball bearings, no mention of liquid. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Queensland weather forecast and potential cyclone development during Easter long weekend. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Tropical low 37U near the Solomon Islands has a moderate chance of intensifying into a cyclone from Saturday, increasing to a high chance from Sunday morning. Far north Queensland continues to experience heavy rain, with the wet season not yet over. The Daintree River peaked at 4.85 meters on Thursday and has been at minor flood levels this week. The Low Isles recorded over 1,500 millimeters of rainfall this year, including 815 millimeters in March alone. Queensland is transitioning from the wet season into drier winter conditions with longer spells of sunny weather. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states localized rainfall around the Cassowary and Daintree coast could reach locally more than 100 millimeters, while Article 2 says coastal rainfall totals will stay below 20 millimeters over the long weekend. Article 1 mentions warming up in the south with slightly warmer than average temperatures inland, while Article 2 does not reference inland temperature variations. Article 1 describes tropical low 37U as likely to move westward or southwestward in the second half of next week, while Article 2 does not mention potential movement direction. This story was covered by ABC News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Neo-Nazi Joel Davis granted bail after threats against female MPs and social media hate speech. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Joel Davis, 30 or 31, is a prominent neo-Nazi figure charged with allegedly inciting others to rhetorically rape federal MP Allegra Spender in November 2024. Davis was granted bail at the fourth attempt after being denied 3 times previously, with his latest hearing held in the NSW Supreme Court on the 28th of March, 2024. Davis was arrested in November 2024 for allegedly posting on a neo-Nazi Telegram channel asking users to rhetorically rape MP Allegra Spender, who condemned a neo-Nazi rally outside NSW Parliament. Davis was kept in segregation at Long Bay Jail due to his political beliefs, with reports stating he had not been outside since December 2023 and showered only every 4 days. Davis allegedly made additional violent messages, including "We need a brutal rape of this C***T, he deserves rape and stupid bitch needs to be beaten" fr targeting MPs Kelly Sloan and Julie Inman Grant. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reports Davis was 30 years old, while The Guardian states he is 31. ABC states Davis was denied bail 3 times in the local court before the Supreme Court hearing, while The Guardian does not specify the number of local court denials. ABC reports Davis was removed from the NSN by Jack Eltis after the rhetorical rape comments, but The Guardian does not mention this detail. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Private health insurance premium hikes in Australia, April 2026. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Private health insurance premiums in Australia will rise by an average of 4.41% on April 1, 2026, the largest increase in nearly a decade. For-profit insurers like AIA Health Insurance, 5.98%, NIB, 5.47%, Medibank, 5.1%, and Bupa, 4.8%, are leading the increases, while not-for-profit funds such as GMHBA are raising rates by 1.98%. HCF's Hospital Optimal Gold cover will increase by 25%, adding approximately $167 annually for singles and $330 for families. Insurers attribute the hikes to higher hospital wages, medical technology costs, Australia's aging population, and increased demand for mental health and chronic disease services post-pandemic. The federal government acknowledged these factors as material, with medical and hospital service costs rising 5% in the last financial year, 2024-25. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states the average premium hike is 4.41%, while Article 2 does not provide a differing average but emphasizes the 13.3% average increase for gold policies specifically. Article 1 mentions the government's Medicare mental health check-in program is expected to help 150,000 people annually, but Article 2 does not reference this program or its specifics. Article 1 highlights that the 4.41% hike is above the 3.73% increase from the previous year, but Article 2 does not explicitly compare this to prior years beyond the nearly a decade context. This story was covered by news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Scientists create first 3D map of clitoral nerves after decades of neglect. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Ju-Young Lee and colleagues at Amsterdam University Medical Center used high-energy X-rays to create 3D scans of 2 donated female pelvises to map clitoral nerves for the first time. The clitoris was not included in standard anatomy textbooks until the 38th edition of Gray's Anatomy, 1995. The clitoris has been historically understudied due to societal taboos around female sexuality, with its anatomy ignored by medical and scientific communities. The clitoris's glans is only 10% of the total organ, with most of the nerve branches extending beyond the visible part. The World Health Organization estimates over 230 million girls and women in 30 countries have undergone female genital mutilation, FGM, which can damage clitoral nerves. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states the clitoris's nerves were previously thought to diminish as they approached the glans, but Article 2 does not mention this prior assumption. Article 1 specifies the scans were conducted on 2 donated female pelvises from a body donor organ program, while Article 2 does not detail the sample size or source. Article 1 mentions the work was reported on bioRxiv and not yet peer-reviewed, but Article 2 does not address the peer review status. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Tottenham Hotspur fires interim manager Igor Tudor amid relegation crisis. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Tottenham Hotspur parted ways with interim manager Igor Tudor after 7 league matches and 44 days in charge. Tudor was hired on February 14, 2024, with a contract until the end of the season. Tottenham lost 3-0 to Nottingham Forest on March 22, 2024, marking Tudor's final match in charge. Tottenham sits 1 point above relegation with 7 games remaining in the Premier League season. Tottenham's 50-year streak in the top flight is at risk of ending. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC mentions Tudor's first match was a 4-1 loss to Arsenal, while The Guardian does not specify the score of the first match but lists Arsenal as one of the early losses. ABC lists Harry Redknapp as expressing interest in the role before Tudor's departure, but The Guardian does not mention Redknapp's interest. ABC states Tudor's final match was a 3-0 home loss to Nottingham Forest ahead of the international break, while The Guardian does not specify the timing relative to the break. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australian aid worker Zomi Frankcom's death in Israeli drone strike and ongoing investigation demands. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Zomi Frankcom, 43, and 6 World Central Kitchen colleagues were killed in an Israeli strike on their humanitarian aid convoy in Gaza on April 1, 2024. Australia's review by former Defence Chief Mark Binskin found a significant breakdown in situational awareness and serious failures in Israeli military practices, concluding the strike was not intentional but due to misidentification and confirmation bias. Israel's IDF dismissed 2 officers and reprimanded 3 others over the strike, acknowledging violations of rules of engagement. The Israeli Military Advocate General is leading the investigation, which remains ongoing as of April 2026, with no final conclusions or penalties announced. Zomi Frankcom's brother Mal Frankcom has demanded the release of drone strike audio footage and a personal apology from Israel, while the family has received no compensation. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian reports Israel's ambassador claimed 200+ journalist deaths in Gaza were exaggerated or disinformation, while CPJ and Reporters Without Borders provided specific numbers, 86 and 29+ respectively, contradicting this. The Guardian states Mal Frankcom demanded the release of drone strike audio, but Israel's ambassador Hillel Newman refused to commit to its release, stating it was in the IDF's hands. The Guardian and ABC both report the investigation is ongoing, But The Guardian highlights that other high-profile Israeli cases have been closed while this one remains open, implying potential neglect. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Manly Sea Eagles sack Anthony Seibold after 0-3 start, Kieran Foran named interim coach. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Anthony Seibold was sacked as Manly Sea Eagles head coach on the 19th of April, 2026 after a 0-3 start to the season, including a 33-16 loss to the Sydney Roosters on the 18th of April, 2026. Kieran Foran, a premiership-winning Manly player and former assistant coach, was appointed as the club's interim head coach following Seibold's dismissal. Foran's first game as head coach will be against the Brisbane Dolphins on the 25th of April, 2026 at Redcliffe Stadium. Seibold had a 49% win rate, 37 wins, 38 losses, 2 draws, in 77 games at Manly since 2023, including a 48% win rate, 37 wins, 39 losses, in 76 games as reported by multiple sources. Manly's 2026 season began with 3 straight home losses: Sydney Roosters, 33-16, Newcastle Knights, and Canberra Raiders. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC Article 1 states Foran's first press conference included a joke about overdosing on chocolate, but SMH Article 3 does not mention this detail. SMH Article 4 claims Seibold was a dead man walking from December 2025 due to Jason King's leadership, while ABC Article 2 does not reference this timeline or internal club sentiment. ABC Article 2 lists Brad Arthur, Matt Bolin, and Michael Ennis as frontrunners for the permanent role, but SMH Article 3 only mentions Arthur and Bolin explicitly. This story was covered by ABC News and Sydney Morning Herald. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. International coalition meeting to reopen Strait of Hormuz amid Iran blockade. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A virtual meeting of 35 to 40 countries, including Australia, UK, France, Germany, Italy, Netherlands, Japan, Canada, South Korea, New Zealand, UAE, Nigeria, was held on the 29th of March, 2024 to discuss reopening the Strait of Hormuz, excluding the US. Foreign Minister Penny Wong represented Australia at the meeting, which was convened by UK Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper. The Strait of Hormuz carries 15 to 25% of the world's seaborne oil and gas supplies, with 1,000 to 2,000 ships and 20,000 seafarers currently stranded due to Iran's partial blockade. Australia has deployed an E-7 Wedgetail surveillance aircraft to the UAE, contributing to Gulf defense efforts. Donald Trump publicly stated that securing the Strait of Hormuz was not America's responsibility and urged allies to go get your own oil. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC and News Corp Australia report Australia may have deployed Tilda 90 SAS operatives to the Middle East, but the government denies offensive action and only confirms defense support for Gulf partners. The Guardian states Iran has laid mines in the strait, while ABC does not mention mines but focuses on Iran's partial blockade and attacks on vessels. Donald Trump's claim that Iran offered a ceasefire was denied by Iran's parliament head, per News Corp Australia, though Trump's tweet was widely reported. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australian government announces gambling advertising reforms amid public health concerns. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Anthony Albanese announced gambling advertising reforms during a National Press Club address on the 25th of April, 2024. The reforms include capping TV gambling ads to a maximum of 3 per hour between 6 a.m. and 8:30 p.m. All gambling ads will be banned during school pickup and drop-off times on radio broadcasts. Online gambling ads will be restricted to verified users over 18 with opt-out options. Gambling ads will be banned in sports venues, on jerseys, and from featuring celebrities or odd-style commentary. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC and Guardian, both, report the Murphy report called for a total online gambling ad ban, but the government only implemented a partial ban with opt-out requirements. The Guardian, second article, states the Roland model proposed a cap of 2 ads per hour until 10 p.m., while Newscomau and ABC report the government's cap is 3 ads per hour until 8:30 p.m. ABC reports the Murphy report recommended a national independent gambling regulator, but the government's reforms do not include this. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia's record-breaking ODI win over West Indies in Women's Cricket Series. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Australia won the first women's ODI against the West Indies by 103 runs in St Kitts on the 20th of July, 2024, AEDT. Australia scored 341 runs from 49.5 overs, setting a record women's ODI team total in the Caribbean. West Indies were all out for 238 runs in 50 overs. Phoebe Litchfield top-scored for Australia with 77 runs, and 5 other teammates reached 40+. Stephanie Taylor scored her first women's ODI century since 2021 with 105 not out from 129 balls. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian says the second ODI is on Sunday, but ABC says it is on Monday morning. The Guardian mentions the Australian team had 5 changes from the Hobart 11, while ABC does not specify the number of changes. The Guardian details Sophie Molyneux's 47-run knock and Nicola Carey's 49-run partnership, but ABC omits these specifics. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. NRL legend Nathan Merritt's cancer diagnosis and South Sydney's Legacy Bell appearance. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Nathan Merritt has stage 4 cancer affecting his liver and esophagus. Merritt has been given approximately 12 months to live by doctors. Merritt will ring the Legacy Bell for South Sydney against the Bulldogs on Good Friday at Accor Stadium. Merritt scored 154 career tries, including 135 for South Sydney, SMH, 135, Newscomau, 146, corrected to 135 as per SMH's precise figure. Merritt last attended a South Sydney game during the Indigenous round at Homebush in 2023 against Parramatta. But not all outlets told the same story. SMH reports Merritt scored 135 tries for South Sydney, while Newscomau states 146 tries. SMH's figure is verified as precise. SMH does not mention Merritt's weight loss as drastic as down from 105 kg to 83 kg in any WSOMU's phrasing, though both agree on 20 kg loss. Newscomau omits Merritt's dying wish to see Souths win the premiership, focusing instead on his inspirational battle framing. This story was covered by news.com.au and Sydney Morning Herald. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Israeli death penalty law for Palestinians sparks UN and international condemnation. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Israeli Knesset passed a law on Monday allowing the death penalty for Palestinians in the occupied West Bank convicted of deadly terror attacks by military courts, with executions to occur within 90 days of sentencing. The law does not apply to Jewish extremists accused of similar crimes, creating a discriminatory two-tiered justice system. UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Volker Turk stated the law is patently inconsistent with Israel's international law obligations and could constitute a war crime if applied in the occupied Palestinian territory. The legislation was backed by Israeli National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, who has worn a noose-shaped lapel pin symbolizing executions under the proposal. Israel has only applied the death penalty twice in its history, in 1948, against a military captain for high treason, and in 1962, Nazi war criminal Adolf Eichmann. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian mentions the law would apply to Palestinians in the occupied West Bank, while the ABC article does not explicitly state this location but implies it through the context of military courts. The Guardian states the law would apply to residents of the occupied Palestinian territory, while the ABC article does not explicitly use this phrasing. The Guardian includes a specific mention of the law's potential to violate international law due to its application to residents of the occupied Palestinian territory, which is not directly stated in the ABC article. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. US imposes 100% tariff on foreign-made pharmaceuticals under Trump administration. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Donald Trump ordered a 100% tariff on pharmaceuticals manufactured outside the US, effective July 31, 2025, targeting patented products only, not generics. Australia exported $1.32 billion in pharmaceuticals to the US in 2025, with CSL, Melbourne-based, producing the bulk of these exports. The tariff is applied under national security powers, bypassing the February 2025 US Supreme Court ruling that invalidated Trump's Liberation Day tariffs. Companies moving manufacturing to the US may face a reduced 20% tariff, with potential exemptions for products meeting urgent US health needs or those produced domestically. Japan, the EU, South Korea, Switzerland, Liechtenstein, and the UK have negotiated lower tariffs, 10 to 15%, on their pharmaceutical exports to the US. But not all outlets told the same story. Newscomau reports the tariff applies to patented products only, while ABC does not explicitly state this exclusion. Newscomau cites a February 2025 Supreme Court ruling invalidating Trump's Liberation Day tariffs, but ABC does not mention this ruling's specifics beyond its general impact on tariffs. ABC claims Trump previously threatened a 200% tariff in July 2024, but Newscomau does not reference this exact figure or timeline for the threat. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Fair Work Commission abolishes junior pay rates for 18 to 20-year-olds in Australia. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Fair Work Commission abolished junior pay rates for workers aged 18 to 20 in retail, fast food, and pharmacy sectors. Around 500,000 workers are estimated to be eligible for the pay rise, according to ABS data. Junior pay rates previously paid 18-year-olds 70% of the award rate, 19-year-olds 80%, and 20-year-olds 90%. The changes apply to the General Retail Industry Award, Fast Food Industry Award, and Pharmacy Industry Award. The wage adjustments will be phased in over up to 4 years, with the first changes starting in December 2024. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC mentions the phase-in period is up to 4 years with first adjustments in December, but SBS does not specify the phase-in duration. The Guardian states workers need to be with an employer for 6 months to receive the adult rate, while ABC and SBS do not mention this requirement. ABC and SBS do not mention the Treasurer's direct quote about the ruling being a great outcome, which is only in The Guardian. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and SBS News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Israel's parliament approves death penalty for Palestinians convicted of lethal attacks. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Israel's parliament passed legislation making the death penalty by hanging the default punishment for West Bank Palestinians convicted of nationalistic killings or acts of terror against Israelis, effective within 30 days, ABC, Guardian 1, Guardian 3. The law applies only to future cases and is not retroactive, sparing Palestinians freed in recent ceasefire deals, ABC, Guardian 3. Itamar Ben-Gvir, Israel's far-right national security minister, spearheaded the bill and wore a noose-shaped lapel pin during its passage, ABC, Guardian 3. The Association of Civil Rights in Israel filed a petition challenging the law, calling it discriminatory by design and lacking legal authority over West Bank Palestinians, ABC. The UN and European nations, including Britain, France, Germany, and Italy, condemned the law as violating international law and democratic principles, Guardian 3, ABC. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian, Article 1, describes Israel's prison system as a network of torture camps with over 80 Palestinian deaths in custody since October 2023, while ABC and Guardian, Article 3, do not provide specific death tolls or framing of prison conditions as torture camps. The Guardian, Article 1, argues the law is part of a deliberate, long-term policy of dehumanization and genocide against Palestinians, a claim not explicitly supported or refuted by ABC or Guardian, Article 3. ABC reports that the Shin Bet Security Agency had previously opposed the death penalty due to fears of provoking revenge attacks, but Guardian, Article 1, does not mention this agency's stance. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia's under-16 social media ban effectiveness and challenges after implementation. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Australia's under-16 social media ban took effect in February 2024, targeting platforms like Instagram, TikTok, and Snapchat. Over 70%, two-thirds, of teens aged under 16 remain active on banned platforms 4 months after the ban. eSafety Commissioner's report found 66% of parents whose children stayed on social media said platforms did not ask for age verification. Facial age estimation technology has higher error rates for children near the 16-year age threshold, 14 to 15 years old. The Australian government has filed a defence in a High Court challenge from a digital rights group regarding the ban's validity. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states the ban has had unintended side effects for the government's anti-vaping campaign, while Article 2 does not mention this specific issue. Article 1 reports the government expects eSafety to throw the book at non-compliant platforms with fines, but Article 2 frames this as a fallback argument with no real enforcement. Article 1 highlights that 5 million accounts were deactivated as a success, while Article 2 dismisses this as irrelevant without addressing core harms. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Victorian government expands device ban in schools to include smartwatches, headphones, and all school types. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Victorian public and private, including Catholic, schools will ban internet-enabled smartwatches and wireless headphones from Term 1 2027. Mobile phones have been banned in Victorian public schools since 2020, with the policy expanded to all schools starting January 27, 2027. Smartwatches with notifications, internet connection, or recording functions will be restricted during school hours. Education Minister Ben Carroll stated the phone ban led to increased student focus, improved socialization, and fewer device-related incidents. Independent review found students were more focused in class and more social during breaks after the phone ban. But not all outlets told the same story. Thij mentions the policy will apply from Term 1 2027, while Newscomau specifies January 27, 2027, no term date given. ABC states Catholic and independent schools requested to be included, while Thij and Newscomau imply the government is mandating inclusion. Thij reports a 20% increase in students believing rules were enforced fairly, from Caroline Chisholm Catholic College, but this specific statistic is not mentioned in ABC or Newscomau. This story was covered by ABC News, news.com.au, and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Legal dispute between Kyle Sandilands, Jackie Henderson, and ARN Media over contract terminations. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Kyle Sandilands and Jackie Henderson were co-hosts of the Kyle and Jackie O Show on Kiss 1065 Sydney, owned by ARN Media's subsidiary Commonwealth Broadcasting Corporation, CBC. The show ended abruptly on February 20, 2026, after an on-air argument between Sandilands and Henderson, with Henderson sending a complaint letter to ARN about bullying and psychosocial health concerns related to Sandilands' conduct. ARN terminated Sandilands' $100 million contract, earning $10 million annually, and Henderson's $82.25 million contract, citing serious misconduct and adverse action under the Fair Work Act. Sandilands' contract included a base salary of $7.4 million annually, a $200,000 consultancy fee, a $120,000 flight allowance, $500,000 in contra-air time, and $2 million annual sub-licensing fees to his company Quasar Media. Justice Angus Stewart set a provisional hearing date for June 22 to 26, 2026, with key filings due by April 24, 2026. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian states ARN disputes Henderson's claims of misleading and deceptive statements under the Australian consumer law, but ABC and SMH do not mention this specific legal claim by Henderson. ABC and The Age report Sandilands said he had not spoken to Henderson since the incident, while The Guardian notes Henderson sent a complaint letter to ARN but does not confirm whether they've spoken since. The Guardian and ABC describe Sandilands' argument with Henderson as tame compared to past disputes, but The Guardian does not include the specific quote about it being a little bit tamer than most days as reported in ABC The Age. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australian political polling shows Labor's declining support amid fuel crisis and Middle East war. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Anthony Albanese's Labor government primary vote dropped to 31% in Newspoll, down from 36% in November 2023 and 34.6% at the May 2024 election. One Nation's primary vote is at 26% in Newspoll and 29% in Redbridge poll, both sources report recent figures. The Coalition's primary vote is at 21% in Newspoll and 17% in Redbridge poll, record low. 72% of voters disapprove of US military action against Iran, reported by both sources. Anthony Albanese announced Australia will underwrite the purchase of additional fuel cargoes to address supply shortages. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states One Nation's primary vote slipped slightly to 26%, implying a drop, while Article 2 reports it forward to 29% in Redbridge poll. Article 1 reports Labor's primary vote at 31%, down from 36%, while Article 2 reports Labor's primary vote unchanged at 32% in Redbridge poll. Article 1 claims One Nation's primary vote is still higher than the Coalition's primary vote of 21%, but Article 2 reports Coalition at 17%, record low. This story was covered by news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Western Australia invokes emergency fuel supply powers amid regional shortages. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Western Australian government invoked emergency powers under the Fuel, Energy and Power Resources Act 1972 to compel fuel suppliers to disclose supply chain details. 6 major fuel suppliers were initially asked voluntarily to provide information about fuel volumes, distribution points, and shipment schedules, but only 3 complied. Premier Roger Cook wrote to the 6 major fuel suppliers requesting details on stock levels, regional distribution priorities, and wholesale market supply changes. Energy Minister Amberjade Sanderson stated penalties for non-compliance could reach $100,000 per day for corporations and $10,000 per day for individuals. The emergency powers are distinct from the broader state of emergency measures used during COVID-19. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC and Newscomau both mention the 6 major suppliers, but ABC explicitly names the 6 while Newscomau does not specify their identities. ABC states the emergency powers will take effect on Thursday, day of invocation, but Newscomau does not mention the exact timing beyond Wednesday. ABC and Newscomau both cite the Fuel, Energy and Power Resources Act 1972, but ABC clarifies it is different from COVID-era emergency orders, while Newscomau only states it is completely different without specifying the act. This story was covered by ABC News, news.com.au and SBS News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Analysis of Bluey's orchestral album and composer Geoff Bush's creative process. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Geoff Bush is the composer of the music for the children's TV show Bluey and its album Up Here. Bluey, Up Here is the fourth album from the Bluey team and the first to feature a chamber orchestra. The album includes a full orchestral version of the Bluey theme song and tracks from fan-favorite episodes. The album debuted at number 1 on the ARIA album charts and won an ARIA award. Bluey's music has reached over 1 billion audio streams globally, with the theme song streamed 126 million times. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian mentions the Sleepy Time track makes Elise cry, but the ABC does not provide specific emotional reactions to individual tracks. The Guardian highlights that Bluey has been watched for 4.8 billion minutes by Australians, while the ABC does not mention this specific number. The Guardian includes quotes from children describing their emotional and musical reactions to the show's music, while the ABC does not provide such direct quotes. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Donald Trump's threats to withdraw the US from NATO amid Iran-Strait tensions. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Donald Trump called NATO a paper tiger in interviews with the UK's Daily Telegraph and The Guardian, SMH, stating his view has been consistent since his first term. Trump said US withdrawal from NATO is beyond reconsideration in response to European allies not supporting US military action against Iran in the Strait of Hormuz, both sources. Marco Rubio, US Secretary of State, previously called NATO a one-way street and suggested the US should reconsider membership after the Middle East War, SMH. The US has about 84,000 military personnel stationed in Europe as part of NATO, SMH. A 2023 US law requires Senate approval, 2/3 majority, for any president to withdraw the US from NATO, SMH. But not all outlets told the same story. SMH reports Trump's comments came after Rubio's remarks, while ABC does not mention Rubio's timing or influence in this context. SMH states Trump's frustration about the Iran war brought back old complaints about NATO, but ABC frames it as a new escalation without historical context. SMH notes Trump's remarks were made in response to US Secretary of State Rubio's criticism, while ABC does not connect Rubio's role to Trump's statements. This story was covered by ABC News and Sydney Morning Herald. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. IOC bans transgender women from women's Olympic sports with new genetic testing rules. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The International Olympic Committee, IOC, announced new gender eligibility guidelines on Friday, mandating genetic SRY gene testing for all athletes in women's categories and banning transgender, intersex, and sex-differentiated athletes from competing in Olympic women's events starting 2028. New IOC President Kirsty Coventry reversed the organization's 2021 framework on fairness, inclusion, and non-discrimination, which had allowed transgender athletes to compete since the IOC scrapped mandatory sex testing in 1999. The new rules apply to the 2028 Summer Games in Los Angeles, the Youth Olympics, and qualifying events, but not community sport. The IOC claims the SRY gene test is fixed throughout life and highly accurate as evidence of male sex development, though medical experts call it unreliable and reductive. Laurel Hubbard, the only transgender woman to compete in the Olympics since 1999, participated in the Tokyo Games but did not place in her event. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian reports the IOC's SRY gene test is claimed by Kirsty Coventry to be unreliable and reductive by medical experts, while the ABC states the IOC asserts the test is fixed throughout life and highly accurate as evidence of male sex development. The Guardian states the new rules could be unlawful under Australia's Sex Discrimination Act and National Integrity Framework, while the ABC does not explicitly contradict this but focuses more on the potential cultural and psychological harms rather than legal violations. The Guardian emphasizes the IOC's reversal of its 2021 framework was backflipped without public scientific data, while the ABC frames the decision as based on scientific evidence without detailing the data's transparency or peer review. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Sydney gym shooting. 3 men charged in daylight assault with firearms. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A shooting occurred outside a gym on Steer Road, Gregory Hills, Sydney's southwest at 8:30 a.m. on December 5, 2025. 2 masked men fired 12 shots at a 48-year-old man outside the gym. He escaped uninjured. The shooters fled in a red Range Rover SUV with cloned number plates, which was later found abandoned in bushland near Macquarie Grove Road, Cobbitty. Police recovered clothing, masks, cloned number plates, and 2 pistols from the bushland near the ditched vehicle. A 40-year-old man was charged with shooting with intent to murder and knowingly directing a criminal group. He was arrested at a Parramatta property on December 5, 2025. But not all outlets told the same story. News Kamau does not mention the alleged target's name, Stephen Halliby, or his gang links, which ABC reports. ABC states the shooting occurred at a shopping centre gym complex, while News Kamau refers simply to a gym without specifying a complex. News Kamau does not explicitly state the 38-year-old was charged with contribute criminal activity. Only ABC lists this charge. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis.